Seats. We'll get this meeting started. For those of you who weren't here this afternoon, we had a very spirited discussion on workshop session item number 5. We did not complete item number 5. We just sort of quit, and so it is going to be the first thing we take up, along with potential changes in deer regulations and falconry. But at this point, I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I'd like to start with the introduction of commissioners.
Randy Dahl, Leon.
Don Budd, Kansas City.
Robert Wilson, Pittsburgh.
And I'm Gerald Lauber from Topeka.
Frank Meyer from Harrington.
Good evening, I'm Deborah Bolton from Garden City.
Tom Dill, Salina.
Linda Craighead, Topeka.
Robin Jennison, Topeka.
Chris Tymason, legal counsel.
Okay, I have just a couple of comments. We had a very nice meal brought in by the Chamber of Commerce. Now, it was very good, and we appreciate it. We appreciate the hospitality. This is a very nice facility, and I'm happy to be here. At this point, if there's any non-agenda item discussions, we'll deal with that now. Only on items that are not going to be covered in the agenda. If there isn't anything, we're going to roll right back where we were with big game regulations. Anybody have anything this evening that's not covered by the agenda? Yes.
Dear Commissioners, I just would hope that you might consider a lower creel limit on Glen Elder Lake for crappie. It's the crown jewel of our fishing in north central Kansas, of course, getting a lot of attention from out-of-state anglers. And there's been some enforcement infractions from folks. The creel limit currently is 50 fish per angler. So I just respectfully ask that that be something to be looked into and researched. Frank Burwell.
Yeah, a constituent discussed that with me before the meeting, and I don't know what the procedure is in the eastern part of the state when we had some concerns as to whether or not the harvest was getting a little hard. We had a creel survey and then made some determinations. I think it's worth looking at. That lake is getting a lot of publicity. Creel limits tend to make one feel better than it actually helps the resource in some occasions, and it's just difficult to tell. But I think that's a good point. We're not going to be able to do anything or discuss it now, but I think it's worth looking into by some of our fisheries people. Any other comments? Yes?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Doug Nemechek from Salina. Just wanted to bring up, I know in the past when Mr. Nyhoff was the wildlife manager up at Glen Elder, quite a few of us put together a petition dealing with the Walnut Creek youth area, and I believe we collected around 1,600 signatures. Mike Lake at Lakeside Lodge, I still believe, has that, and we pretty much felt it was neglected. It wasn't really looked into as far as possibly changing that youth hunting area to another area that did not have as much impact on the regular public area, maybe moving it over to the state park or some area such as that. I haven't talked much to Chris up there, the new manager, but just kind of wanted to bring that up since you ladies and gentlemen were here this evening.
Okay, and I don't know if about the rest of the commission. I don't know if I know enough about that to even comment. So I'll look into it just to see what it's about, but I just don't know it at this point.
All right, thank you.
All right. Anybody else have anything this evening? Lloyd.
Okay, thank you. We left off on Regulation 115-4-4, and I just finished up with items on the crossbow that we have in that regulation at this time. I'll go over that again, that the items that we have, the item that we have is to allow individuals with a youth big game permit or any individual 55 and older to use a crossbow during the archery season. And then we have a 125-pound draw, 16-inch length limit on the arrow. The broadhead would be the same as our other broadheads allowed for archery. And I'd mentioned that we'd looked at it from the equipment standpoint. The crossbow is very similar to a compound bow in its ballistics characteristics and efficiency. It has some advantages. It might have some minor effects on recruitment and retention if it was allowed for archery. It would probably have very little impact on deer populations. We can't see where it would have much of an impact on the harvest or the resulting population. And with that, I'll return it to you.
All right.
Mr.
Well,
Chairman,
yes.
as you get a little older, you look back, and people 55 years old are kids. At 60, you're starting to slow down a little bit. Maybe at 65, you might need a little help. So I'm saying at 70, it's pretty doggone tough. So I would say if we set it at 70, we're just about right. Because, I said a long time ago and several times that as far as I'm concerned, a primitive weapon is the English longbow. And to put a crossbow in with primitive weapons, those things are more like a rifle, scope sights, everything else, I think Mr. Magoo could probably hit a deer at 50 yards with one of them, so I'd say go with 70.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Lloyd, where did the 55 age?
Okay. We looked at what some other states had done. Many states, back about 2003, there was a major push for additional states to open up to the use of crossbows, and they've been phasing in recent years. Most of the states are just opening it up to archery hunters. A few states are putting an age restriction on it, 60, 62, 65, different ages. What I did was I looked at the age structure of our hunters and also of hunters that do not have an archery permit versus hunters who do have an archery permit. They're very similar, the age structures are, but you do see a little bit of a plateau about 50, 55, right in that time period where you start losing archers. We start losing all hunters from about 50 years old and older. I guess we're getting older quicker, Frank.
I am not a bow hunter, so somebody can educate me here. With the new modern compound bows and you draw how many pounds is that? Is it 10 pounds or 15 pounds or what is it?
Okay,
Has to be 45 to be legal.
To be
It
legal?
goes up.
Okay,
Goes as high as maybe 70 on a lot of those bows.
okay.
But it has a real big let off so that you're not pulling. You can pull that weight, but you don't hold it. You can come up to like an 80% let off on a bow. So when you pull that back, it's not as tough to hold.
So pulling the bow back, And then
requires,
as compared to pulling the crossbow,
crossbow
two
is
totally
caught.
different.
It's got a stirrup on the bottom of the crossbow, and you stand in that stirrup with your foot and pull that thing up, or they have a device that you can crank it at. Either way.
So it's just a lot easier to do the crossbow than it is the compound.
The advantage of the crossbow is that it locks the bow at full draw.
Right.
It locks it in that position. And then the hunter is able to, from that point, operate that bow similar to a rifle, to a gun. Whereas a compound bow or a recurve or a longbow, those have to be pulled back and then held. The recurves and longbows, you're holding all of the draw weight at the end. The compound has cams which allow you to basically, after you reach a certain point, they tip over or turn over, and the individual is no longer holding all of that weight. They're holding 65 to 90% of the draw weight. The draw weight on compound bows is typically, it's an adjustable in most of the newer ones, but it's typically in the 45 to 70 pound range. Many bow hunters will be using something with a draw weight of 65, 70 pound draw weight.
And the age of 55 is on the lower end of what some of the other states have?
Most of the states have not issued an age. When they have, most of the states have just opened it up or not opened it up. The states that have picked an age, typically those ages are 60, 62, or 65.
Okay, thank you.
Lloyd, this chart that you passed out here in the break, the ages are at the bottom, and this is number of permits issued on the left column, is that correct?
That's correct, and it's also, it's a little bit backwards for most people. It's the older ages, it looks like the hunters are getting younger, you know. As you go to the right, those are younger hunters.
Right. Well, it looks to me like if we were to go, based on what your recommendation is, 16 and 55, we would impact less than 200 archery hunters across the state. Is that correct?
That's of the archery hunters. Then it also influences people who were not archery hunters. These would be people who are currently firearm hunters who would then possibly become archery hunters.
Okay.
So,
And let me ask this, at the age of 70, there were only 20 permits?
yeah, they drop off.
No kidding, that much, okay. Thank you.
Lloyd, the perception and we'll probably hear from some people in opposition, but the concern is that it eases the chase for game. It is, I've been told that it is easier to become a proficient vertical or horizontal archer than it is a vertical archer, that if you practice with a crossbow, it won't take you very long to where you'll be able to do a fairly good job at it. It is perceived to have a little more range, and if you're used to hunting with a stock, the concern is that it's less sporting. There's a lot of debate as to whether that's the case, but I think that's sort of the central theme to the opposition. For a long time, I've felt that I didn't have much of an opinion, much one way or the other. You notice that in the Cabela's archery catalog, there are as many pages now devoted to crossbows as there are the standard vertical bows. And that in and of itself doesn't mean that that's a wide popular mandate, but it does mean that there is a serious industry, and that industry is responding to some level of consumer participation. I mean, their goal is to put them in there to sell more bows. And I always hate to be reactive, but I think there is a considerable push, and I think there is a lot of interest in going forward with this. I think somehow if we put some restrictions on it, we probably, it makes it a little more palatable maybe. Maybe it doesn't. Any more comments for the commission? And then if not, we'll see. I think we've got, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like-
Well, first of all, any comments from the commission?
No, you can use a crossbow during rifle season.
Yes.
Okay.
You
so
can
there-
also use a crossbow, people with medical disabilities
Right.
can get a special permit irregardless of their age.
And right now, their crossbows are pretty much statistically insignificant.
Yes.
But they can use them during the rifle season, no problem there. I still would like to protect something of the old-time art of using a primitive weapon. And I'm sure none of the bow hunters will agree with me when I say, let's go back to the English longbow, because that's a primitive weapon. And I think, I'm going to go ahead with the stupid, compound bow, because it's, as far as I'm concerned, getting too modern, but that's all right. So let's preserve something of the old traditional.
Doug Phelps from Manhattan. Lloyd, before supper, you were putting numbers out about the declining participation with age, and I think that, most reasonable people would agree that as you age, your physical abilities diminish. I can speak from personal experience on that. Right now, we have regulation that allows anybody to go to the doctor and tell the doctor they can't pull their bow anymore. They need a crossbow permit. That's how liberal it is. Probably have to explain to the doctor what a bow is. You can get that permit. So, to put this in, it would be essentially redundant. We've already got regulation that covers those older hunters, unless they're Jack LaLanne, I guess, following up on what Commissioner Meyer said, that, modern bow season started in the 1930s, and the bow hunters were granted a long season based on the simple fact that it was more difficult to take deer with archery tackle than it was with more modern weapons. And we've enjoyed that blessing for 80 years or so, nationwide. And the more we redefine archery into the things that it never was, and the easier we make it, well, we're going down a road that at some point the people that vote are gonna say, why do you have such a long season? You've got nothing but a modified firearm. Where's the woodmanship, the hard work, the effort, the ability, like you alluded to get a deer within range and draw a bow undetected. Not an easy thing to do. In fact, a lot of us can testify to the fact that it's hard to get the bow back when you're in range.
Doug, I have a question for you. If you were to summarize your opposition to crossbows, what is it? What reason or reasons do you have that you would not allow them?
I have no opposition to hunting with crossbows. First, I want to make that perfectly clear. My problem is, and I've been accused of being romantic, and I'll plead guilty. But I want to see some semblance of our archery tradition and the type of equipment and the methodology that we use, remain intact. I've shot crossbows. I've sold archery equipment. I understand, a lot of this. I don't believe that the drive for crossbows and the archery season has anything to do with end use or demands. It's all about, the manufacturing and retailing end of it, trying to create a market. And the reason that Cabela's, who I don't know how they became the arbiter of what is appropriate equipment and what's not, but apparently they are. The reason they want to sell compound bows, the reason they want to sell crossbows, it's not the bow itself. It's all the paraphernalia they can sell you. You can double the price of a bow just with accessories that hang on.
You would say your primary reason is maybe, I don't want to say romantic, but nostalgic, that you want to maintain the more primitive way of hunting.
Well, I want archery to remain archery, and one other point.
You could still hunt that way, even though there were.
Well.
Do you feel it would hurt the resource?
Pardon me?
Do you feel it would hurt the deer herd or hurt the resource?
No, because, but it may damage the sport, by diluting the quality. One other point I failed to make earlier, with respect to this ability to draw a bow, I have to ask, it's probably been 8 or 9 years now, we eliminated the minimum draw weight so that those people, young women, small of stature or whatever, weren't prohibited from bow hunting. If all they can draw is a 30-pound bow, then they can take that out there. They're not expected to shoot some arbitrary higher weight. So we've accommodated all these issues in over the years, and I don't know. It just seems like that the more we give people, the more they want. Then instead of trying to forgive me, but draw a line in the sand. I think we need to stand for something. I know people that want to hunt deer with a 50 caliber BMG.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessarily, want doesn't necessarily translate to need, and it certainly doesn't translate to should.
I'd like to see a show of hands, how many people would like to speak, so I can kind of keep an idea as to how, not that I want to limit anyone's exposure or discussion, but I'd like to keep some of this brief. I have a general idea that we're going to be hearing quite a bit of the same thing, but in a repackaged manner, and I just want to make sure we don't go on into the night, so we'll kind of limit them fairly close. Yes?
You let somebody talk for 30 minutes at the start of the meeting. Why can't these people talk for 30 minutes if they want to too? You've got to be fair. You let one individual talk for 30 minutes. Why would these people be any different than they do tonight?
I'm not sure that I have a good answer for that. Go ahead.
My name's Matt Palmquist from Greenfield, Kansas. Couple quick questions for Lloyd. At the deer meetings, I attended the one in Scott City, and it was mentioned multiple times that those deer meetings were fact-finding or information-gathering meetings. And it was also discussed that there's a deer committee now. I'd like to know on this crossbow issue with the ages and that stuff, has the deer committee been consulted with this? And where are we at on the deer committee, I guess?
Okay. Yeah, I will answer that. That's where we got into the problem with getting the regulation out so that it could be voted on in March. And our next meeting of the deer committee is in February. We're hoping to have some results back from the deer harvest survey. Also, we will include those same questions that we had at the public meetings in that. We had to have something in the regulation. We had to establish a regulation in order for the commission to vote on, to be able to act. And we did. We came up with this without their input into that the way we would like it.
So, I mean, the regulation couldn't have stayed as it was before. I mean, it had to have been changed this in March, basically, or you could, like the season dates were proposed to stay the same until you had more time. That'd be my only question.
The point there that we wanted to have the commission have the opportunity to have input into this. This is a permanent regulation, and it requires, I believe, 60 days before the commission can act. It has to be published 60 days ahead of time. And in order to make that, we had to come up with something to get in there. And that's one of the problems that we got into.
Another point with the deer surveys, with your numbers, and I think it was brought up by one of the commissioners, they show that the majority are strongly opposed to a lot of these questions on here. If you start looking at strongly opposed plus the opposed, including crossbows. But when that was brought up, it was, well, that was mostly bow hunters. How do you know it was mostly bow hunters? We didn't put anywhere that, yes, I'm a bow hunter, or I'm a rifle hunter. Scott City, I know, is pretty even.
Yep.
So.
That's just something that I responded to one of the commissioners based on the people that I knew that were attending those meetings.
Well, my point is, are we just dismissing what bow hunters care about because
No.
it's just a bunch of bow hunters that are going to these meetings? I mean, that's what it sounded like, Lloyd. So that's, neither here nor there, I guess. And my last question or comment is, the crossbows during a general archery season, whether you have the age requirement or not, with the combination of an any season or any weapon tag that we have for whitetails, I think it's going to be a little bit different than some of the other states that just maybe put them in archery season. As a rifle hunter, I could say, well, I can pick up a crossbow pretty easy, but a compound, I don't want to take the time to learn that. The transition and the likelihood of them going into the woods. And what I see negative from that is that, I may bow hunt a property, but during rifle season I stay out because you choose to rifle hunt. Well, now guess what? We're both in there at the same time. And it's just going to reduce opportunity. We talk about opportunity, but what it's going to do is, where there is access still, it's going to congest that access because you're going to have more people in the woods at the same time. That's my only comment on that. So, thank you.
Young man, your feeling is then if crossbows become legal, there will be more people hunting during archery season with a crossbow?
Yes, and
Okay.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing that we have more people hunting, but when, there's always been these long-standing agreements, well, I'm not a bow hunter, you go in there and go ahead and hunt. And we have these understandings that, I'm not going in there during rifle season. But now, that may not be the case. It may be, well, and, I'll admit, it's a selfish reason that I may lose properties because now the guys that have only rifle hunted always decide, well, I'm going to crossbow hunt. So.
No, I understand. I've archery hunted for 35 years, so I feel what you're saying, with the exception of, and the only thing that I'm looking at here is you're going to impact, based on this data that we've got right now, less than 200 people if you make it under 16 and over 55. So the masses that you're concerned about won't be affected by that. Do you understand?
I understand what you're
Okay.
saying, but what somebody said earlier that the majority of hunters are in the, 45 to 50 range? What about 5 years from now? My next question is, what's going to be proposed next year? To do away with the age restriction? I mean, that's the direction that this appears that we're moving. It's been discussed that you can use a crossbow during rifle season, the antlerless season. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity for crossbows out there. It's just not during the general archery season.
Do you feel like you can shoot further with a crossbow than you can a compound bow?
I think that you can shoot further with a crossbow sooner. You could sight that crossbow in and go out and be pretty proficient with it, 50, 60 yards, whereas a compound, it takes years of practice where you feel confident shooting long range. And the other thing that wasn't addressed, the big difference, a bow, there's motion involved. You have to draw that bow when the critter's standing at 20 yards. With a compound, or with a crossbow, it is locked. I mean, you're just standing there waiting. And there's no motion anymore. It takes that away.
Well, what do all you want? What do all you guys out there want? Just say it. Don't do anything. Everybody's of the same consensus. Leave it like it is then. Your opinion as well?
Yeah, exactly. I think I think it's been said before, the department's done a great job of trying to accommodate crossbows and for the disabled, and even without, not just disabled, they're legal during the rifle season and some of these other seasons. So it's not like they haven't tried to adapt to provide more opportunity for people that want to use crossbows, is the way I see it.
No compromise in it then for you guys. I mean, it's either don't do it or do it.
55 years of age is awfully low, in my opinion, regardless of those charts. I mean, 200 people in the whole state over 55 and under 16, I find that hard to believe.
That's,
I
kind of did too, but that's what it says.
Right.
And these are the real numbers.
You can start counting your friends and family that have kids hunting, and I mean, you're going to start racking numbers up pretty quick. So I just don't, 200 seems awfully low to me, Lloyd. I mean, I can't dispute your data because it's on a piece of paper, but so, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Lloyd, I have a question.
Just one quick
Is
point.
there-
With respect to the 200, Lloyd said that those were people buying archery permits. So that if they move from archery to crossbow, it's a wash. You haven't gained anybody, you haven't lost anybody. You've just moved a segment, to a different weapon choice. Now, when you look at the 5-time larger pool of rifle hunters, and we don't have any data on how many of those, that's where the congestion and the problems are going to come. There's a whole lot of people, I'm sure, would tell you they have properties that they can bow hunt on, but they can't rifle hunt on. Somebody else comes in and rifle hunt. Well, now all of a sudden, if that rifle hunter's competing for the bow season,
Do you archery hunt?
yes, I,
Do you? How many days were you in the timber this year?
because of health reasons, none at all. I wasn't able to pull my bow, but I didn't.
No, I was just curious more than anything else.
No, this was a very disappointing season for me with that respect. But, there's a gentleman about 40 miles north of my house that was climbing trees in his 70s. At one time, he had the state
He's
record.
one of these little number guys.
Well, he's probably dead now, but he wasn't even using tree steps to get into his trees when he was 65 years old. I can't even climb a tree now,
I think we understand your position. Thank you.
But, he's an exception. But this gentleman never asked. He got to the point when he couldn't shoot a bow, and he says, I've killed enough deer, I'm just going to climb trees and videotape them from now on. And you have a great deal of respect for his respect for the sport.
Incidentally, I've been reflecting here in response to Mr. Pierce's comment, to which I had no answer. I still don't have any answer. And in retrospect, I probably should have made some attempt to limit the first discussion to a smaller amount of time. But at the first part of a meeting, you kind of hate to do that. And I will not limit, because you're right, there is just as much importance for people at the end of the meeting as there is to the other end. Sometimes you get to a situation to where they appear to be endless as far as when we just keep rehashing the same thing. So that was the attempt that I was trying to get at, but your point is well taken, and sometimes at the front end of a meeting, it just happens that way. And perhaps that is because of poor chairmanship, but that's kind of where we are. So everybody can say what they want as long as they want.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. Dave Easton from Pottawatomie County. I believe the handicap that we have now takes care of the crossbow issue, all we need to do. The age limit thing, low and high, is just another step in putting crossbows for everybody in archery season. It's just a step. Commissioner Myers mentioned he was over 70. I won't be able to catch him, but I'm pushing real hard on the other side. And I shoot a 60-pound longbow, and I shoot it horizontal and vertical, depending on whether I'm sitting or standing. A few years ago, we dealt with an issue called a draw lock, and it was demonstrated to the commissioners, I think, in Topeka. And what it did, it was some kind of an apparatus these people were selling. You could draw it back, and it'd lock, and you could carry it around locked and cocked, which is what a crossbow is. At that time, we opposed it, the commission opposed it, and as far as I know, these people have gone away. The difference is, these draw locks were cheap. They didn't cost much. These crossbows, you're talking 4 figures. They've got a lot of money to spread around the State House, put pressure where you guys don't even get to make the decision. And I understand that's the hard part that you're in. It's a marketing thing. It's not bow hunters saying, I really want to hunt with a crossbow. It's people saying, I really want to sell these. That's what it is. I'd like to take a minute on a little separate issue, but somewhat related. In the last couple of years, I've been on a campaign. I have mailed and emailed all the commissioners last year and the year before, and Dr. Fox, I haven't had any response back. I'm wanting to outlaw magnifying optics in archery season. I wasn't aware that magnifying optics on bows were even legal until the Topeka meeting when you allowed them on the black powder. There was a comment then that you could use them on bows, and I didn't know that. And right now, I think it's not an issue. There aren't a lot of products out there that have magnifying optics for bows, but you can get them. And I would like to address this problem before it becomes an issue. I'd like your help. I'd like to say we cannot have magnifying optics in archery season. Thanks a lot.
Okay?
I started it, when I made my notes, I said good afternoon, I'll say good evening. Some of you will remember me as Steve Wood from Hayes, and I spoke to you in August about my bucket list of wanting to hunt with a crossbow during archery season, not only for myself, but for other fellow Kansans. My goal was to have this accomplished by 2012. I'm not here tonight to give you the full dose about the crossbow. I did that in August, except Don, you weren't there. I simply want to tell you a few things that are going on around the country. I know there's controversy over it. There has been in every state, no doubt. But here's a few things that are going on, and somebody's talking about popularity. The Hayes Daily News, unbeknownst to me, just evidently in the last month or two, posed a question on their website. It was very simple. You could click yes or no. Would you, as a Kansan, approve of Wildlife and Parks making a crossbow legal in the state of Kansas? So I clicked yes, and then I clicked on results, and over 900 people had already voted. And 93.1%, and I know that's just a random thing, it isn't anything scientific like Lloyd would do, but 93.1% of the 900 people voting said yes to that question. So while you're hearing from dissenters tonight, understand that the population out there does not evidently feel quite the same way. I've got a quick question.
Yes.
Were they aware that the crossbow was already legal when they took his survey? It's only partially legal. I can't answer that, Frank. I don't know. Another question. Yeah. As I remember correctly, you or someone in your family is in the crossbow selling business?
Yes, no doubt. I mentioned that initially, and I wasn't going to bring that up, but my son's in the crossbow industry. And that's not why I'm doing that. It's how I learned about the crossbow. If you'll remember my talk then, that's what I said. It was in my second paragraph of my remarks. And this isn't just about Steve Wood. This is about a lot of other Kansans that are now getting involved with this. Let me move on with some other stats. In August, I told you that 18 states are fully crossbow inclusive, and that a total of 26, including that 18, have some regulation better than Kansas. And Kansas is the disability and in gun season. That's changing. Some of it's already changed, and more will change in the next 60 or 90 days. Indiana has already voted to be fully crossbow inclusive in 2012. Wisconsin, which has been a 65 and over state, has legislation pending that will either make it fully crossbow inclusive or 55. Illinois is very similar to Wisconsin. Minnesota, Arizona, Alaska, Colorado, and Missouri are all taking close looks at this, and while not all of those will act this year, some of them undoubtedly will. By the spring, when the regulation season sort of winds down, it wouldn't surprise me if that number of 18 isn't 20 or 21, and that number of 26 probably will be around 30. It's moving from East Coast to West Coast. I gave all of you this map. Evidently, some of the questions stemmed from this map, and so maybe you need to go review this. When this map is reprinted, there will be less red, and the red is like Kansas right now. And you can see there's a lot of green. There'll be more green appearing and more of those neutral colors which represent age appropriate or partial season or some other combination. And when it's reprinted, I hope that Kansas will be changed in color. As for the proposal that's before you, I think it's just absolutely outstanding. Yes, I would have preferred a full, just like Nebraska did 14 months ago. They went straight from nothing to full inclusion. But it isn't going to happen in Kansas. I understand that. But the 55 and over, and especially the proposal on the youth, shows a lot of positive response on the part of whoever has put this together. And we know Lloyd's in on it. I don't know who else is in on it. Have no idea where the input came from. But I expected negative reports from some of those area meetings. Wasn't as much as I thought. There was also some positive people there, some people who want to crossbow hunt and want to get into it. I contend there's a lot of space in the woods. There's a lot of deer. Those who want, there are people, I told you in August, there are people out there shooting the recurve and longbow that still don't approve of the compound. And the compound and the crossbow aren't the end of it. What do you think another 20 years is going to bring? Some other advents, undoubtedly. So I commend those who did this and made this proposal. And I noticed one other thing. I'm especially taken with the youth support of this proposal. When this is reprinted, when Kansas passes this, they'll need a special color for Kansas because no other state has addressed the youth movement. And we all know that there are declining numbers of youth getting into hunting. And this is another opportunity. And so Kansas would not only be some color for 55 and over, but they would also need a footnote in there saying that it also included youth. And what a feather in Kansas' cap for doing such a thing. I hope I can count on your support. Unfortunately, I won't be here March 22nd. I didn't understand the date of this, and I made reservations to take my wife to Myrtle Beach, and I don't think I can back out of that one, guys. I see some of you smiling. You probably understand that. Do any of you have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, and this is Steve for you or for Lloyd, either one. You're saying there's like 18 or 20 states that have had some form of crossbow. Let's just don't get specific here.
Okay.
when that happens and over a period of time, is there empirical evidence, I'm sure there is, about how does the numbers eventually flesh out? I mean, do half the people that are, is it half crossbow and half? I'm just wondering how big of an impact this thing
Okay.
is really going to be 5, 10 years down the road. I know we can't predict the future, but what have other states experienced with this?
Okay, I have my August speech memorized, and I can tell you that Ohio started in this 30 years ago, and they now have about half of each. And they hunt compatibly. They go together. Doesn't seem to make
Their
any difference.
season is the same, and there's
Yes,
about half
yeah.
crossbow, half bird. Okay.
Yeah, but other states, it isn't going to have a big impact. This 200 number that keeps getting kicked around, there will be, and I hope there is, some recruitment, or pardon me, some retention of hunters on the 55 and above.
Is Ohio a shotgun-only state?
Yes, slug. Yes, yes. But I hope there is retention. Part of what I was hoping for was some retention so the numbers don't drop off. But part of the other end of that is the recruitment with the youth. Kansas is going at it by this proposal from both ends, and I think that's very good. Those 18 states are full crossbow inclusive. If you can use this bow, you can use this bow. And now it's 19 because of Indiana.
Other than that state, are you familiar with any other states, what those ratios are? Lloyd, do you have any
No.
information on that, or?
Yes, there is some information. It's pretty sketchy. The one that looks maybe the easiest to understand would be Tennessee's, and I can give you their a copy of their information.
Just tell me, is it
They basically
50
stabilized.
Is it 50/50? Is
No,
it 70?
nowhere
What is
near it. It apparently takes, this is expensive equipment, and it apparently takes quite a few years for anything like the Ohio 50/50. I'm not sure what it is in Arkansas. That's the other state that's about 30 years of experience with crossbows being legal during archery season.
So you don't know what the number is for Arkansas or Tennessee?
Tennessee, I have the numbers, but they started about 2006, I believe, and it comes out to about 10-15% of the archery hunters.
Okay, that's what I was
And it's
looking
been relatively stable
Okay.
in the first 5 years. You know, they jump in the first year, and then it drops back down to stabilized in that 15% range. I can give you a copy.
Thank you.
I don't think, Randy, that it's earth-shaking. It's just helpful. I don't think, Ohio's a real exception to it because they've been at it so long. But the other states that are getting into it, I don't know. If you had 5% the first year, my guess is that would be a big deal. Any other questions?
You said 26 states have better regs than Kansas. You mean more liberal?
More liberal.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. From my perspective, better regs, something beyond the handicapped and the gun season. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Lloyd, while the next guy's coming up, were you around when Kansas went from the primitive black powder to inline stuff?
Yes.
Yes.
We started with muzzleloader seasons in the 1980s. But we really never had, people considered it primitive, but our regulation never said primitive. And we allowed inlines just as they came online, just as they started into the business. So we
So
never had a
No
a real
designation
discussion
from
about
a
There-
flintlock to an inline gun then?
There has been discontent, I would say, from some of the traditional muzzleloaders, but they actually make up a very small portion of the muzzleloader hunters, as do the people in archery that use recurve and longbow. Almost all of our archers in Kansas use compound bows.
Do you feel like if there was a restriction back when, and I know this is a difficult question, do you think we'd have the same controversy between the primitives to the inlines?
I think we would have a very difficult, states that have tried to regulate and define what a primitive weapon is have had a great deal of difficulty and legal interpretation of them. There were Civil War black powder equipment with scopes. So it's tough to say what a primitive, what was primitive and what isn't, and people will argue those points endlessly.
Thank you.
Real quick, Matt Palmquist from Grainfield again. I hadn't seen this before, but the more important sheet I think to look at as far as tag numbers is the resident, not statewide archers. And from 13 to 16-year-olds, there was 6,000, a little over 6,000 probably. And then from 65 to 69, those are the ones I just tallied real quick, were 4,000 to 5,000 right there. And then it tapers off to 6 years old and all the way to 88. So there's a lot more than 200 people we're talking about that could be going into the woods with a crossbow. That was just archery tags. And I think from what we're seeing here, the majority are probably going to keep bow hunting because they're passionate about it. Now, there will be probably some that, due to age and whatnot, get in the woods or too young to draw a bow. But I just wanted to bring that up so you could see a different.
And I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but I'm going to ask our resident advocate archer at the end of the table here what his opinion is.
I was going to get there, but I thought I'd wait. Because I've probably bow hunted for 32 years. Technology, equipment's changed. You can go through all the emotional arguments. You can talk about what may seem right to me, what may seem right to you, but what you want to do versus what I want to do is all a matter of choice. If we have this, which I do think, quite honestly, I think what we've chosen or what the recommendation is from 16 and 55 and older is probably appropriate. One for the youth for recruitment, and 55 and older for retention if at all possible. And you can see on the chart, we've known that the age starts to drop off after that. And it has nothing to do with limiting anyone's choice. If I still want to continue to use the compound, I will use the compound. I've never shot a crossbow. At some point I might, but at this point, it still hasn't, it's my choice as long as it's everyone else's choice. So I really have a hard time when I hear the emotional side of it saying what I think is, this is the right way, that's the wrong way, so I want to limit your choice. And I just really don't agree with that. There's some simplicity in the fact that it's pulling a trigger, but quite honestly, you still haven't eliminated the sight, the sound, the smell, all the other elements that go along with hunting. So each person's perception and each person's desire to hunt in their way, I just don't see, limiting that. We look at it and say, well, we need to keep it because we've had long bows. But if you look at the technology changes in compound bows in these past few years, where would it end? And what will be developed in the next few years? So from my perspective, I really don't think we need to limit the choice. And we haven't limited the individual's choice. So, when you get rid of all the emotional side of it, same way with access, I don't know that there'll be that many people convert. We don't know. But by putting in a regulation that appears to basically encourage youth and retain, it'll give us a year or 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever to be able to actually collect some additional information. The argument about you can shoot longer, you can shoot faster, you can shoot straighter, statistically really isn't all that. You might be able to get a little farther out, but quite honestly, if you're sitting in the woods in a tree stand, I don't know of anybody that goes out and cuts 55 and 60 and 70 yard shooting lanes to be shooting through. So, you haven't changed any of that. And as far as access, it really hasn't limited anyone else's access. There may be some more pressure on public lands, but that's such an unknown that it's pure speculation. So from my perspective, I think this is the right choice.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Jerry Vieira from Topeka.
There has been a study done on harvest difference between archery and cross guns, and that study was done in Alabama. And what the scientific study showed was that crossbow hunters had a 3 times more success rate than regular archery hunters. And so you're talking about 50% people coming over into archery season from gun season or from some other season is going to increase the harvest during the archery season, which is going to make it 6 times more difficult to harvest a deer with a bow. So, I made the mistake of only making 1 copy of the study. If you guys want a copy of it, you can look at it, make a copy of it, or I can email it to you guys, so you can take a look at it.
I'd like you to email me one, please.
Sure. No problem. Okay. But I do think it's going to have an effect on the harvest. It's going to have an effect on the quality of our hunt as archers.
Is it the harvest, or is it the success rate or
Success
ratio?
rate, success ratio.
Because Ohio, I think, is statistically like 47 to 44 or something like that. So there's only about a 3% difference in actual harvest success rate. Now, some of the other states that you look at, and I've done a lot of reading on this, say that we have so many more deer taken, but if you look at the actual numbers that are actually utilizing that equipment, and then break it back down and compare the actual success rate, there really, from what I've read, hasn't been that much difference.
Okay, well, this might show you something a little bit different, a different
Happy to look at
perspective. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. More comments from the public.
I might make one more comment if that's all right. Well, someone else is coming up. I've bow hunted with the same individual partner for probably 24 years, longer than most people have been married, and he and I don't agree on this issue, so.
Who gets the house?
My name is Richard Showalter from Hollywood. Basically, I want to speak about the fact that I'm 69. I shoot a 63-pound compound and a 67 or 57-pound recurve and a 55-pound recurve. 1984, I had shoulder problems. I corrected it with physical exercise. I still do that to this day. And I shoot those bows. And I hit things sometimes. But I just wanted you to know that age is not necessarily the end-all and be-all. So 55, if you want to set it at that, but it doesn't have to be that low. That's about the only argument I have right now, because you guys have done a very good job of expressing everything else that I had on my mind. So I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Next.
Sorry you say that like it's a bad thing. My name's Bob Griffin. I'm from Lebo, Kansas. I got the chance to meet a couple of you gentlemen this afternoon. I guess my first question, kind of for Lloyd, kind of wanting to know what are the numbers of rifle hunters that are going to pick up a crossbow and hunt during the bow season? You have no idea.
We don't know. We know we've got about 116,000 deer hunters.
Right, I understand that. And that's one of the why I asked the question, because you don't know. We
That's
have
right.
no idea. Ever since we started the any season permit, the number of bow hunters have increased. I see it every year. It increases more and more. As a matter of fact, we get more non-resident bow hunters too every year. Most of my hunting is done on public land. In the 20 years since I started bow hunting, the number of bow hunters have probably tripled, at least. And since we started this any season tag, I've seen probably an increase of double the number of bow hunters, because a lot of the guys that were rifle hunters and they only bought a rifle tag because that's what they like to hunt with, that have picked up a bow. I acknowledge that they finally took the challenge and they put the practice in and they've picked up a bow. So now you've got even more bow hunters in the woods, because now they can try and kill a deer with the bow. And if they don't get that accomplished, then they can go back and pick up their rifle and shoot that deer that they couldn't get during the bow season. Now you're going to lump in all the crossbow hunters on top of all the archery hunters that are already in the woods. That's my biggest concern, is access. I've got a 14-year-old daughter, loves to hunt with me. At 14, she killed 2 turkeys with her compound bow. There's no reason why, if a kid practices, they cannot shoot a bow. No reason whatsoever. I think that's really about all I had to say. Does anybody have any questions? There's no reason why youth, with some practice and some effort, the big Q word there, they have to put forth effort. Anybody can shoot a bow. I can teach anybody to shoot a bow with effort. There's no weight restrictions any longer. My wife's 5'1". She pulls 48 pounds, shoots deer and turkey with a bow. My daughter's 14, 5 foot tall, 90 pounds. Pulls 30 pounds on a compound bow, and she can kill deer and turkey, so anybody can do it with effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lloyd, when you give us the recommendations for these deer seasons, is your objective, the department's objective, to increase or decrease the harvest of deer every year?
It would be variable. This year, the recommendation for some of our western units is to increase harvest. Our objective, if you look back at our strategic plans through the years, has always been to have healthy deer populations that lived in harmony with the available habitat that we had and in the tolerance level of the Kansas citizens.
And where are we at today with our deer herd currently?
Well, I think we're pretty good with our deer herd right now. We've got, as you have seen in other meetings, we've got individuals that are upset about deer vehicle accidents. We've got individuals that are upset with crop damage that deer cause. And I won't argue either of those points. Both of those are realistic. We've also got individuals that are saying they're not finding deer where they have traditionally hunted in the levels that they would like to find them. So we're trying to balance off these opposite and opposing factions of, are there enough deer out there that people enjoy? Are there too many causing damage? I think when I look at our numbers, we've been very stable since about 1999 as far as deer population, deer accidents. We're doing fine adjustments now. We're not doing major adjustments, which we did back in the late 80s and early 90s. So I would say that when I compare the numbers that we have with deer vehicle accidents per million travel days with other Midwest states, I think we're in an excellent situation. I think we're doing great.
And I'm going to pose the same question then to when you submit these regulations to us or proposed regulations, is it to encourage or discourage the number of hunters?
I would say we're always trying to encourage hunters. We are trying to get hunters to enjoy the opportunities that we have out there. In my career, we have not tried to reduce the number of hunters, and I don't see that as something that is on the horizon any place. We're trying to recruit hunters. We're trying to provide opportunities. We provide different seasons and structures that let them come in and out, give them more flexibility and opportunities.
And the reason I asked those two questions is because I think the theme is the same with all you guys. And I understand it, I truly do. But if you look at the big picture, and we have a deer herd we're talking about giving 5 doe permits, bonus permits, and we're talking about wanting to get the youth involved in this. We're talking about keeping the other people involved, like Frank and all of us, really. If that's the objective that we're trying to reach, someone explain the downside to what you've proposed, because I just don't see it. If we're going to get a few more people hunt, if we're going to maybe harvest a few more deer, I don't see a downside in an age-restricted regulation. and then maybe this next guy's going to tell me what it is. So come up here and tell me.
All right.
I don't know, I wasn't even going to come up. Because it's extremely hard for me to come up here and talk about archery and bow hunting without talking about the romance, the tradition, and all of that goes with bow hunting. So I'll skip about the Popa-Jung and all that crap. Since this has all come up, I have done a lot of reading, a lot of research on crossbows and that sort of thing. And I, like most others, have absolutely no problem with crossbows in the gun seasons. I have no problem with the crossbows for handicap. My feelings before were, I never called them crossbows, I called them cross guns, because that's what they appeared to me. They weren't the bow that I built and I shoot. So I got into reading these reviews in an NRA magazine. You need that one? The National Rifle Association, and they're giving reviews on crossbows. And the first one I read was on the 10-point, and as they talked about it, they talked about the polymer stock and the cheek piece and the triggers and the barrel groove and all stuff that sounded to me like they were talking about rifles. They weren't talking about bows. They weren't talking about archery. And I read another one on the Strike Zone, which is made by Savage Arms, and it was pretty much the same kind of thing. Everything we're talking about sounds to me like the National Rifle Association giving reviews on rifles. The TAC-10, which is made by PSE, and Pete Shepley said that he decided to do this crossbow thing because there were states starting to legalize them, and they wanted to get on the ground floor of the market of it. So they designed this thing that you mount it onto the lower of an AR-15, and he chose the AR-15 because of the big AR-15 craze right now. You use the same trigger, same safety, same stock, everything. You just mount these two limbs on this AR-15 and have at it. And one of the things the reviewer said is it's just like shooting a rifle. Then I read about the quick draw. This one's really slick. You don't even have to cock it. You push a button, it has a CO2 cartridge on it, automatically cocks it, you drop in a bolt, fire. Push the button, drop in a bolt, fire. Basically semi-automatic rifle. Then in some of the research that I did, I read about this rack that had been developed several years ago that you could mount on a crossbow. Lay all your bolts in it, and it automatically fed them. Now we have a full semi-automatic. Push a button, fire, push a button, fire, push a button, fire. They're guns, they're rifles. I don't have anything against them in a rifle season where they belong, but they're not archery. I bought my first Kansas archery tag in 1971. It's a wonderful sport. We can't look at the numbers of archers over the age of 65 or 55. And by the way, I'm 65 and I'm a little insulted by that 55 thing. But one of the things you have to look at is how many gun hunters are going to take up the crossbow, because it's just like shooting a gun. It's just like hunting with a gun. The only thing is, now we can hunt in archery season. Now we can hunt in the rut. Yeah, it's just an easy way. A year or so ago, I was talking to a guy who was big in Safari Club. Used to be a bow hunter. Took up the crossbow because it's easy to get world records with a crossbow. Not many people have done it yet. He's already got 2 or 3 world records in the last couple of years. Yeah, not many people have done it. He's doing it, and he's getting world records. It's easy, but it's not archery. It isn't archery hunting. So, that's all.
Mr. Chairman, Lloyd, this is kind of a big deal, this thing about crossbows. So going into this, we do a lot of things by statistical analysis and empirical evidence. Have you run numbers, or have you put forth any thought to what really is the impact with this if we were to do this? Are we going to increase the number of people hunting deer in Kansas by 5% or 10%? Or, I mean, it seems like something of this magnitude we'd want to take. I mean, businesses all the time project their profits and revenues, that type of thing. And I know you're a smart guy and you can do this, so have we done this, or have we looked at that?
No, I have not, and I haven't tried to estimate how many more, if we would recruit additional hunters. I can look at some of the Tennessee data, Ohio data, some of the other states, and try to extrapolate from that. But at this point, I don't know. I don't have a good feel of how I would try to estimate.
Well, lack of
what it
any
would
other
do.
information, wouldn't that be our best attempt to try to determine impact? To look at other states that have been going for 5 years, 20 years, 30 years?
I'll see if I can find the data that will go with that. I think it will be difficult.
The one thing, Lloyd, I was thinking about with Ohio, you'd think there'd be a greater propensity to move to a crossbow if you're in a state with shotguns only. Because in Kansas, it seems like there's a lot of rifle hunters that won't want to sacrifice that distance and that ability to shoot longer range. I think if you're shooting with a shotgun, I think it's going to be a little bit different. I don't know. Do we have any more, we'll get back to this question. Do we have any more public comment?
Good evening. Kyle Adams, Wichita, Kansas. Try to stay brief. And first of all, I just want to thank you guys for taking your time to listen to the comments we've all had. I'm going to kind of go a little different direction here. Youth hunts, every year for the last 6, I think I've involved myself with some youth turkey hunts. Take about the first 10 days and spend them with kids. Got a lot of kids involved in hunting that way. And I can't ever remember having a single one ask me if I'd ever used a crossbow, or if any questions about a crossbow. So I guess my question revolves around where did the request come from? It's kind of new to us that this is being proposed. I know that there's one entity that's involved, but I guess I want to address, where did the request originate that this bill is being proposed from? Secondly, if we do give children or young men and women a crossbow at 14 or 15 or 12, and then at 16 we take it away, what sense does that make? In other words, what I'm saying is that once we get to that 16, where are we going to go from there? We're going to change the rule again and allow it, to continue? I also don't see that if we have a group transferring from one genre of hunting to another, that we're going to create a whole lot of revenue with this. And I think that's probably a main goal right now. It seems to be with the tags that we're allotting. So that's my brief points. Thank you for your time.
More public comment.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Jerry Vieira, Topeka. Just a short comment. It's going to increase the opportunity for the rifle hunter because they have the any season tag, so they can hunt all of archery season with a crossbow and then hunt all of gun season with a gun. So that's where the opportunity is going to be for them. That's it.
Any more public comment? Any more comments from the public? Yes, sir.
I have one short thing I meant to mention before. There's an old rock star named Ted Nugent. He's got a ranch down in Texas and a national bow hunting show on outdoor TV. he has film of his son loading up a Ruger 1022 semi-automatic rifle with flat-ended bullets and shooting arrows out of a 1022 Ruger. It's on film. Now, what side of the line would that fall on? Would that be on our archery side or that's too technical? We got to draw a line. We got to draw a line or there isn't anything. All right, thank you.
Ron?
I don't have anything significant to add, except that there's just one thing that constantly concerns me about crossbows, and that is the enforcement problem with night poaching. Because it just seems to me that the crossbow would be the ideal tool for poachers. And, that's certainly something we don't want to encourage, and I think that's something for law enforcement folks to address. I know on our land, I just learned today that there were 3 blood piles found, within half a mile of our land just in the last week or so. And has obviously occurred at night, but, poaching is a real problem. And I don't want to give them any extra tools. Thank you.
Okay. Drew?
Drew McCartney, Gorham. You guys all know who I am and how I feel and so on and so forth. You're talking statistics on what a crossbow can do and how far it can shoot. And you're throwing numbers out. I have had a lot of experience with crossbows. I was president of Physically Challenged Bow Hunters for a lot of years. And I've got some very dear friends that can shoot crossbows and can shoot them well. And they have to shoot them because they don't have another choice. And I'll guarantee you, I have seen the range of a crossbow, accurate range. I mean, it's got its problems with the wind and so on and so forth. But I've got a dear friend who's paralyzed from here down. He's in a wheelchair. He can lay that crossbow on a brace, and more power to him. But he will shoot 3 out of 5 arrows into a paper plate day after day. He'll drive tacks with them. And we're talking about picking up rifle mentality here, adding more people. And there's nothing wrong with a rifle as long as we keep it in rifle season or gun season, muzzleloader season, whatever. You're doing that with a crossbow already. I'm afraid, like it's been brought up before, that you're going to bring more opportunities to people to hunt with a crossbow that have a rifle mentality in archery season. What's that going to do to the quality of our herd? What's it going to do to hunter retention? We're trying to get kids out there with bows constantly. You run out of places to hunt, the rifle hunters, they get that week, and we try to beg for the other time. You're going to be putting a weapon out there that people won't blink to shoot 60, 70 yards, especially with mentality of being able to reach way out there with a gun. I'm really worried about the quality of our herd. It's a proven fact that the numbers increased with crossbow. It's not dramatic, but you take Ohio and Tennessee and Arkansas, it's been proven that there's more deer killed with a crossbow. But it also affects their quality. Thank you.
Okay, at this point, does the commission have any questions of anybody who spoke? Is there any more public comment? Anybody else like to say something? Now, what do we do from here?
Next item on the agenda.
Either move forward or not. If we're not going to move forward, then we don't have to publish regs, and we don't spend a lot of time on people's parts, so.
I have a question. And I don't know if I'm directing this at anybody in particular. When we talk about the quality of the deer herd that's left, because more people will be taking deer with a crossbow, I suspect that most of the people who have spoken today are talking about bucks. And being one that really works on conservation, I only shoot does. So when we talk about the quality of the deer herd, you're talking about a decrease in bucks. That would be my question. And a trophies. We're talking about trophies, the decrease of trophies. Okay, but we're talking about trophies versus conservation and keeping a healthy herd with, I'm just trying to get that clear. All right.
We need, we can't hear, I'm sorry, but for the people who are listening, would you come up to the microphone?
Chris, while she's coming, what are you asking the commission to do tonight?
Is there a consensus to move forward or not? If there's not enough consensus to move forward, then we won't publish regulations and we won't bring this back before the commission in March.
Do we need a practice vote? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
I mean, I hate practice votes.
I don't like to do practice. It's not a practice
We did
vote,
one
but
of
if
them,
there's a
didn't we, Michael,
majority
once?
of commissioners who want to move forward or want to have the opportunity to take the next 2 months to look at the issue some more and then vote in March, yay or nay.
And moving forward means we're accepting this as presented. Is that moving forward?
That means the regulation would be presented before you to vote in March, is what I'm saying.
The regulation is in front of us, correct?
Mr. Chairman, if I may first. I've heard a lot of good information from people that are very knowledgeable what they're talking about. I would like to mull this over and possibly compromise, which is a dirty word in America today, but taking all of the information I got this evening, I would like to have the opportunity to change my mind and possibly do something different than what I said originally. Believe it or not, that has happened before. Don't ask my wife. And so let's continue considering this.
Ma'am.
My name is Janet Post, and I'm from Burns, and I'm a rifle hunter in a whole house full of bow hunters. And I think the point about the buck as opposed to the doe, the trophy as opposed to the doe, we're going to, our whole goal is to bring people to our state to enjoy our resources. If we kill more trophies, then we have diminished what we're trying to do. And if you have the bow hunters and the rifle hunters hunting the same deer during the rut, which is the peak, when most bucks can be taken unaware, then you're going to reduce that herd. And ultimately, our tourist dollars will suffer. Ultimately, our tag dollars will suffer. And I think we do have to look at it from commerce also. Protecting our herd is important. The reason that we protect it is so we have all these animals to hunt.
Are there any more public comment, any more comment from anybody? Michael, you have anything? Okay, now, we did a straw poll, I think it was on prairie chickens one time, and I swore I'd never do another straw poll. So we may not call this a straw poll, but I'm going to propose that we go forward with what Lloyd has presented to be voted on in March. If we're going to have to hop over this issue one way or the other. And I think between now and March, I think I can't have too much information, and I think all of us need as much information as we have. I respect every opinion that's been given tonight, but I think we have to do something. And I am concerned that it is a likelihood that if we don't do something or are in the process of doing something, it may happen in the legislature anyway. And I know that we're not supposed to care about that.
Yeah.
But we're not supposed to care about that, but I do. And so I don't know how we want to have a consensus, whether or not each of us wants to say whether we want to just pull this idea and not make any change. I'd like to, I guess we could do it on a consensus, but I'd like to go forward, and nobody's committed to a vote, but we can just kick this around forever, or we can try to get some sort of a vote in March, because we have to get something done in time to be able to deal with the upcoming season, I'm guessing. May not have enough time anyway, but I'd like to move forward at least to get it to a vote.
Chris, in March, if it comes back before us as presented or modified, that we as a commission then will vote up or down whether to approve what we have in front of us or as a compromise. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So I think your two options here are you either want to move forward to a vote, which I'm not saying that commits you to a yes or a no, or you're going to say, no, we're not going to move forward at all. Those are your two options.
How many would like not to move forward?
Okay. I think
Mr. Chairman, I have a question about your question right there. I need more information on the issue, and I've given Lloyd a lot of extra work to do about these numbers and statistics, and it would be my suggestion, you just go down the row with the 7 people sitting up here, and if you don't have the votes, you don't have the votes. I mean, if you know you don't have the votes, there's no sense in calling and doing the regulation and publishing it, and then come in March and then it fails. I mean, if everybody said yes, then you know where you're going to go. If everybody says no, but it's not like that, you've got a mixed bag here. So I would like, I guess what I'm saying is just go down the row here with each of the commissioners and get their view on it. And then you'll know, Chris is asking, what is the consensus? Then you'll know the consensus. Just saying you're going to go vote on it doesn't tell you whether you have a consensus or not.
I'd like to give one example here, and I don't know, guys. I just don't. But I'll give you, my example is this. I shoot competitive clay targets across the world. I've been doing it for 30 years. We have this same issue in shotgun sports. Whether it be the ammunition, whether it be magnification, believe it or not, they put scopes on shotguns, guys. They do all of it. And you know who's going to win at the end of the day? You guys, because you're going to put the time and effort into it. You're going to get one guy that's going to go in a tree, and he may accidentally kill his buck with that crossbow. But at the end of the day, it's time. There's too many other factors involved in this thing. What I'd like to do is I'd like to give these guys the chance to come back, and maybe if you guys have a legitimate compromise for this thing, if you're going to stand fast and say we don't want it, that's going to be difficult, I think. If you've got a compromise and you want to have some input with Lloyd during this time between now and March, my suggestion is that you do that. Because the equipment's not going to make the harvest better. The hunter's going to make the harvest better, and we all know that.
I do think, though, if we don't have a vote in March and then have the next vote later, does that put it too late to do anything this year?
if you don't, I'm sorry, can you state the question again? If you don't
Well,
have the.
if we continue to revisit it and don't bring it up to a vote yet, does that preclude us from having it in effect for 2012?
No, it'll be in effect in 2012. The issue is whether or not it's in the information that goes out to hunters.
No, I understand. The same reason we had a meeting early, so that people would have notification of it.
I don't know if it would impact, I mean, the only deadline that it impacts really is our non-resident application deadline starts April 1. So typically, because the commission moved that back a couple years ago, that kind of hurries up the process a little bit by a month as to whether or not we vote on regulations. To make it go to April it would still be in effect for 2012. I don't know about when we turn out, I'd have to turn to Mike Miller and ask him when we turn out the regulation summary pamphlets that go out. No, not the actual booklet at the hunting regs, but the regulation summary that is like a trifold piece of paper. It's usually for fall deer, or deer and fall turkey. Send out permits and, when the permits go back out, not when people are applying. Okay. So I guess the answer to your question, Mr. Chairman, is yes, you could vote in April.
For the sake of direction, let's just go down the line and say.
I
either
think
move
that's what we
forward.
need to do.
From that perspective, because this isn't, it doesn't mean we can't change our mind. This isn't the final vote. This isn't the final vote on the regulation.
That would be my guess.
Yeah.
Can you compromise, if you decide to go ahead and look at this in March at 55 years old, can you make a compromise in March, or do you have to stand fast with what they approved to go ahead?
Because and the way they can, yes, there can be changes made to the regulation in that regard if it were to go back the other way. I don't think, the legislature kind of changed the rules on regulations process last year, but in this instance, what we're talking about, I think there could be an amendment.
I think I'd like to go ahead and have each commissioner state what their opinion is as to what the direction they would like to go. One of which is just end discussion and kill this now and not have any vote at all. And I think the other option is to have a vote in March and not commit, by whatever you choose to do, doesn't commit what you're going to do, because between now and then, we're going to have a lot of information provided to us. And we'll hopefully be able to make a more informed decision. So I'd like to start, in fact, I'll start at that end. What you would like to do.
My consensus is to move forward.
I'd like to move forward as well.
Are we ready to vote in March?
Robert,
I'd like to not even discuss it anymore.
you'd like to what?
Not discuss it anymore.
All right.
I'd like to have these guys that have had the concerns all along and have probably followed this thing from the beginning. Lloyd, I'd like for you to, we've got a record of who all these guys are. You guys represent associations, you represent yourselves. Get with Lloyd, see if you can find some kind of compromise in here. If you don't like what it is, like I say, if you're going to stand fast, then that's okay too.
What's the question, Mr. Chairman?
Our question is whether we just kill this now or whether we go ahead and have a regulation to vote on in March.
I need more information in order to say, yes, go ahead and vote on it in March. I'd like to get the information that I've requested from Lloyd and any other information that's out there. Because it might change, it might not be, and I know we can change it at that time, but it might be 62, or it might be 15, or...
For those of you who work in big game, how big of an issue is it if we do this if we voted in April?
It's really on the information side that I think it's the impact.
Huh?
I think it's the impact on the information side of the agency.
I think what Mike is saying, that we can put it on the website as soon as it's done. I hate to cram this down if there's people that are hesitant. I'm not sure that we're going to have any more sense of clarity in 60 days than we are today. And I think we're going to have the same issues, and we may end up with age 59 or something like that as a compromise. And we'll just have to see. But I don't want to cram a vote down anybody's throat. I want to give people plenty of time to be able to discuss this. And so, while I think I probably have a majority who would say, let's go ahead and vote on it in March, I think to give Randy and some others some opportunity to look at some information and see if there could be some more discussion. I don't have a problem recommending that we, what would you call it, have another workshop session on it and then go to a public hearing in April with it?
That's correct.
Does that cause you any grief, Lloyd?
No, it wouldn't cause me grief. We would still have the 60 days that we have to publish something before we can vote on it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not different than most other regulations where we have to take a little bit of guess and see if it comes close. I mean, if we have to prepare amendments, you guys will know in advance to be able to prepare amendments from that perspective.
Do you think we could work out something so that we don't have to make a final decision? But we're going to have to make a final decision one way or the other. And would that make people more comfortable if we bought another meeting's worth of time to discuss it?
Well, I think, Lloyd, the question is probably to Lloyd more so than anyone else, is the questions that you hear from the commission and the questions you hear from these guys, do you think you could get everybody's answers before the March meeting? Because if you can, let's just do it at the March meeting. I don't know, I think a lot of the questions are the same.
I think a lot of the questions do not have solid answers. And that there isn't some magic answer to them. It won't be some.
I don't think we're looking for a magic.
59 years old or 64 or something like that. These are going to be, it's going to be vague any way we look at it.
But, for example, when Randy asked you, can we get surrounding states and what they've done, what the impact on the harvest is, what the impact in additional hunters is, we're not asking you to change your recommendation possibly unless you feel like there's a compromise with these guys. And the same thing that I've conveyed to you guys, and I know you're going to come up and tell us, but you need to tell him when he's gonna do it. We know what your position is.
And I understand it. I spoke with you a little bit earlier, Bob Griffin from Lebo again. All of you commissioners will be receiving a letter here real soon from the Kansas Bow-Hunters Association inviting you to attend our annual banquet, which is in Hutchinson, Kansas, on 24th, 25th, and 26th of February. Usually, Mr. Fox and Mr. Tymason usually come to that and do a visiting in the afternoon with us. My hopes would be that we have a business meeting with all of the KBA members that morning. And what I will try and do during that business meeting is see if we can come to a solution and possibly a compromise, what you were asking for, what our membership would be agreeable to.
Could that be done as a possible amendment?
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we can have a recommendation from Lloyd, and then we can offer any number of amendments that we want that'll be voted up or down. If we amend the motion or the recommendation, then we can vote on that. So, we can take care of this in March and get done with it. Because we've got I don't see where anybody's going to say that they haven't already said.
I've vacillated enough on this. I think you're right, Frank. I think we're going to vote on it in March, and I'd like to have a possible amendment discussed, maybe a couple of possible amendments that we can view at the time. Randy, I hope that enough information comes that you can make a decision at that point in time. And I understand where you're coming from, but I think we need to get it done. We've got 60 days to get something published, and I think we need to do it with a possible amendment. And if you could submit we care what you say. That's part of the reason that we're all stuttering around with this thing. And we care about the bow hunters. They're a good group. So we'll see what we can do. I don't know if we can stem the tide anyway, but we'll see what you can come up with. If you could get that as a possible amendment to Lloyd and Chris, we'd see what we can do for the March meeting.
Right, and I'll be at that March meeting too. So if there are further questions then, and feel free, when you get that letter, all my contact information will be at the bottom of that letter.
Okay.
So at any time, feel free to contact me with any questions that you might have or any information you might want. And like I said, hopefully I'll see Lloyd Fox out at our banquet, and hopefully some of you gentlemen will come and enjoy it. We're going to have a guest speaker from Iowa, and we have a great meal, and your meals will be given to you, and we have a wonderful time.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes. It's Bob Griffin. Thank you.
Are we done with this section?
Yep.
Huh?
Let's be done.
Lloyd, I kind of got used to you standing up there. All right. What a night. All right. The next item is potential changes in deer regulations.
I'd like to stick a fork in this one very quickly, if I may.
Please do.
Okay. We have had inability to get our survey through the Kansas Ag Statistics. And as such, I won't have a landowner deer survey completed by March. Without that, I feel that we should, with what information we've gotten so far from the public meetings, I will have the 35,000 or so hunters surveys. I'll have that information, but I won't have the landowner survey. And as such, I would feel like we should probably table this discussion until next year. That will give our deer committee extra time to review all of that information. It seems that we have plenty of controversy right now to handle without bringing up some of these others. That most of these suggestions that were suggested did not come back with very high public support at public meetings.
I agree with you 100%. All right, let's talk about falcons.
Mr. Miller, would you start up my 500 point or slide PowerPoint? I screwed that up, sorry. I'm only kidding, I'll make this quick. I brought falconry regulations to you several times in the past. I don't think I need to go over anything again unless anybody has any questions that has come to them or anything since the last commission meeting.
Any questions? Hopefully you don't have a falcon with a broken wing.
No.
In the garage. Any questions for Mike? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sure, yeah, please.
Well, Mike, please. First, just from an informational standpoint, I was wondering how many, it says that we have 71 falconers in the state. And I'm just wondering how many birds they keep. You have is there something, some public access to the number and type of birds that these falconers have?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. We'd have to put together a review of all the 3186As that they turn in because, it kind of fluctuates.
Yeah.
Because, they'll trap birds, they'll turn birds loose on wild birds and stuff. Then there's, the captive birds, there's, some breeding that goes on. Some of those come into falconry and some are used just for breeding purposes.
Okay.
So
well,
I don't have a number right off the top of my head.
Yeah, I thought it'd be good to have that. I think the department should keep good track of these people, but I wanted to point out something here of consistency. Some of these falconers live in towns. And this afternoon, there was a decision that rehabilitators, wildlife rehabilitators, can't live in town and have their raptors that have been injured and that sort of thing. But falconers can. They can raise birds and do this sort of thing. And this is not anti-falconry by any means because of the fact that I think that with their birds, they can educate people about the majesty of these birds. In many cases, they do. But there seems to be, and I'm really not engaged in helping rehabilitators. But I do think that they are also one of your they're one of your constituents. And a lot of times I think the Department of Wildlife and Parks does not give sufficient credence to these constituencies that are non-game, wildlife, rabbit, rehabilitators and that sort of thing. And I just want to bring that issue to you, to the forefront and ask you to keep that in mind on many occasions. Because as we go forward and build support for the department, we have to have everybody that we can bring into the fold to support the department, and not just the ones buying hunting, fishing, or falconry permits, but everybody. We need them politically, and we need them just from a general standpoint. And I think that the raptor rehabilitators, I think generally probably, and I counted up that there are 86 of them who are associated with that in the state, and 74 falconers. They're both very important constituencies. But I do think that we had really gave the raptor rehabilitators today the short end of the stick on this, where they can't live and operate in towns, but you can raise falcons in town and you can have birds falconry that you go out and capture and bring in, you keep for wild and turn loose and that sort of thing. And you can also use falconers or falcons that you have for this purpose, which may be the same kind of raptors, for educational purposes. You can display and use them for educational purposes. And yet we said this afternoon that these people who care about rehabilitating raptors or other species cannot do that. And so I think that you should go back and take a look at trying to make these things consistent and reach all of these different parties.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's a difference in the numbers of animals, birds, whatever. A rehabilitator can have, a large number that create a problem for their neighbors. And as we live in close proximity with each other, we've got to respect our neighbors. A falconer with one or two birds is a whole different story.
Is it one or two? Are they only allowed to have one or two?
And they're,
or five?
They're good, healthy animals. They're not, so there's a big difference there. But when I talk about rehabilitators, I've got to think about their neighbors.
I agree. And that's why they shouldn't be absolutely prohibited from communities. They may have to be 100 yards from the nearest residence or have the agreements of the city or so on and so forth. But you guys suggested just a blanket prohibition for rehabilitators in communities, whether they be a little a little burg in the middle of western Kansas or in a larger place like Wichita. And I think that you can't just cast one whole group aside. And I would agree with you, the way this one operation was described here in Salina or Junction City today, I wouldn't want to live next to some menagerie either. But I think that's where you don't necessarily cast them all out, but you have regulations on how many animals, what kind of animals, that sort of thing, especially when you're getting down to the people that are involved in the sub-permittees too. You know, how many sub-permittees of these 69 are going to live in the country and be able to continue to help these people? I just think that we shouldn't throw them all aside.
I don't think we were throwing all of them aside, and I don't recall hearing from any raptor rehabilitators this afternoon. Mostly what they were talking about rehabilitating were raccoons, possums, and skunks. And no one talked about raptors this afternoon, and so correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, the only experience I've had with raptor rehabilitators in Kansas has been with wildlife rehabilitators in Kansas, or those who deal with, eagles, hawks, owls, that sort of thing. So I'm thinking in that context. In terms of possums, raccoons, and that sort of thing.
I'm wondering why we're rehabilitating possums and raccoons in town and skunks.
Well, yes, we are, but except that there are constituencies that have a great deal of concern and compassion for wildlife too. We don't all look at these same species in exactly the same way, and they may think that it's helpful, especially if they have some place to go with it. If a possum with some young is hit in a road and they bring it in and then they want to raise them a little bit and release them into some countryside, if there's a willing place to leave them, that's okay. And in fact, you will find that most wildlife people, as youth, had various kinds of wild pets and things, even though we really discourage it nowadays. A lot of people got their interest in conservation through close association with wildlife. But I just bring this issue up, and it's as much for the department as it is for the commission, because I do think that you have to give some thought to these folks and to the things that they can do from an educational standpoint.
All right.
Thank you.
Ron, I appreciate that, but I think we need to kind of get rolling here. So let's talk about the next item in the evening session, presentation celebrating 75th anniversary.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I think this program was added when we thought we had a really light evening session scheduled. That didn't turn out that way, but this will be pretty quick.
Okay.
This is just.
I give you all the time you want.
No, the crowd has really thinned out, so I'm going to go pretty fast here. This is just basically to call attention to a landmark event that happened 75 years ago, and this year will be the 75th anniversary. One of the most important dates in wildlife conservation history, because on September 2nd of 1937, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the Federal Aid to Wildlife Restoration Act. We call it Pittman-Robertson, we call it PR. You've heard about that already today on several references. It's named after two of its primary sponsors, which Senator Key Pittman and Representative A. Willis Robertson. And what it did, it extended a 10% tax on firearms and ammunition used in sport hunting. And that money was then earmarked to be allocated back to the states for wildlife restoration. And not only has this act been historic in what it has accomplished, but it was historic in that the very people that would be taxed were the ones that were pushing for this tax, the hunters and the folks from the hunting and shooting industry. Because at the turn of the century, our wildlife populations, which had been perceived to be inexhaustible, were in very bad shape. There was desire for wildlife management, there was desire for wildlife laws, but there was no state agencies, there was no money to pay for enforcement. Our wildlife populations were at a crossroads due to subsistence hunting, unregulated market hunting, and habitat destruction. And we only have to look in Kansas at the turn of the century into the 1930s and see where the bison, the deer, the elk, the pronghorn, turkey. Most of our desirable wildlife species were nearly extirpated or were extirpated at that time. Funding from this landmark legislation basically allowed states to begin to make changes. The excise tax, as I said, has been distributed back to the states. It's a 75-25 match. We provide 25% of whatever project we pay for with this money, and we use hunting and fishing license or hunting license dollars to pay for that 25% match. You'll see in the briefing book, in the briefing booklet, it does say $2 billion, but I looked at a spreadsheet today that adjusted that to more than $6 billion has been raised through this excise tax since 1937. In Kansas, it's brought in about $115 million. Nationwide, 62% of these funds are used to buy, develop, maintain, and operate wildlife management areas. 4 million acres have been purchased, and more than 40 million acres are managed for wildlife under agreements with other landowners. 26% is used to pay for surveys and research, which has been so important to the evolution of our wildlife management. Following in the footsteps of the PR Act was the Dingell-Johnson Act, and that happened about 13 years later in 1950, when a very similar act was established that placed an excise tax on sport fishing equipment, boats, and motorboat fuel that was then allocated back to the states on a 75-25 match. It pays for fisheries projects, boating access, and aquatic education. And in that short time, it's already produced $6 billion that has been distributed back to the states. And since 1950, Kansas has received $96 million in federal aid. Together, they call this the Wildlife and Sport Fish Restoration, or WSFR, and we're calling attention to the 75th anniversary because I think they want to make sure that this funding is maintained, because they want people to realize how important it is to our programs, to state agencies all across the United States. In Kansas, we receive about $15 million annually right now. It makes up about 25% of our budget. And we use the revenues from our hunting and fishing licenses to make up the 25% match. And we pay for things like the hunter education program, of course, management of all of our state lands and our state managed lands. But there are also programs that would not be possible without this money. Our hunter education program, which probably 7,000 to 12,000 kids a year go through that program. I think that's more than 400,000 kids have gone through it since 1973, and we've basically reduced our hunting-related accidents to almost an insignificant number because of this. Boating access is one of the keys that the money that comes from the DJ Act. The walk-in hunting area access program would not be possible without this federal program. The FISH program, the CFAP program, these are programs that rely heavily on funding from this. Last year, money from the PR funds was used to help buy some of the land at the Parsons Ammunition Plant. We enhanced the shooting range at Fancy Creek, at Tuttle Creek State Park. The groundwork was started at the Hillsdale Shooting Range. These are some of the things that this money is used for. And you only really need to look in our own backyard to see whether or not this program has been successful. It's rightfully called the Wildlife Restoration Act, and at the turn of the century, we had no deer in Kansas. Now we have a deer herd that is the envy of the United States. Wild turkeys, they were not existent prior to probably even the 1960s when we started our reintroduction program, but now we have a higher success rate for turkey hunters than any place in the nation. Pronghorn antelope is a really good national story. While we only have a small area of the state that has viable antelope hunting and viable antelope populations across the western U.S., antelope populations were in pretty dire straits, and now they're healthy throughout the western states. At one time, it was thought that one of the larger subspecies of the Canada goose was actually extinct. Now we have Canada goose populations that are actually a nuisance in some of our urban areas, but they do provide some outstanding hunting opportunities across the state of Kansas throughout the year, or throughout the fall. And this is kind of a neat picture. It kind of comes full circle, and you see what the real purpose of this is to maintain these programs and create these opportunities for our future generations. And this is a picture that Rob Riggin took of a little girl that hunted down on the Parsons Ammunition Plant for a youth season and was able to take this deer. And so we just wanted to call attention to the 75th anniversary to some of this really landmark legislation. And I think if somebody tells you that hunters and anglers pay for wildlife management, it's partially because of the licenses and the permits they buy, and it's also because of the excise taxes that they pay when they buy guns or ammunition or fishing equipment. And all of our wildlife resources have benefited from this, not just the game species. All of our wildlife resources have benefited from this because of some amazingly visionary people 75 years ago. So that's really what I got for you, just to call attention to the 75th anniversary. I'll make it short and sweet. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you had any.
Any questions for Mike? All right. Good
Thank you.
job. Brad?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Hopefully you all received the updated public lands regulation changes that Keith sent to you earlier this week. I apologize for the confusion, but there was 2 items that we were discussing as late as Friday afternoon, and we kind of missed it, but we wanted to make sure you guys were updated with the current recommendations or discussion. Public land section manages over 335,000 acres of land and water in the state. Although this is a small percentage of the land base that's open, that can be, accessed for hunters and anglers, it's a very important part of the hunting community. Thousands of hunter days are spent in the field on public lands. With that limited land base and the high use, we get a little bit of conflict with users that may be related to fairness or opportunities for everybody that the land is available for. Let me give you a little bit of history of where these things are coming from. About 2 years ago, we had a Public Lands Committee that reviewed our public lands recommendations, and we actually looked at every single public lands regulations we had, and there was about 3 of these issues that came to the top that related to some issues that were identified by our managers, our regional supervisors, that related to equipment, primarily, that was being left in the field. With that, we took those recommendations, we talked to other public land staff, we talked to other division staff, we talked to some other people outside the division about what their perceptions were of these issues. At the end of last year, hunting season, we did a public lands survey. We sent surveys to 17,000 hunters, resident and non-resident. We received about 2,000 responses. This is a little low, it's about 12%. Usually when we do a public land survey, we've been getting about 25%. This year it was an electronic survey through SurveyMonkey, so whether that had an impact on it, I'm not sure. But 2,000 responses, and I'll go through those responses as I talk about each individual item here that we're going to discuss. Tree stands was identified as an issue. We do have a regulation, 115.82, that addresses when a tree stand can be put up, when it has to be taken down. It doesn't, just because you put up a tree stand, it's not your tree stand. Anybody can hunt out of it. Essentially those things, but it doesn't address how many tree stands that can be put up. And it's been difficult because people have, some of our areas have put up a number of tree stands. We've got some areas, they're relatively small areas, but they'll put up 20 to 30 to 50 stands, one person. And what they have done is they've given the impression that somebody is hunting out of that tree. And in fact, in some cases, they have no intentions of ever hunting out of that. Some of these tree stands you wouldn't want to be up in. They're so dilapidated. So that was identified as an issue. People come in, I think hunters take great pride in putting up their own stand and want to hunt out of their own stand. They don't want to take that conflict, go to public land and look for somebody else's tree stand to hunt out of. If they see a tree stand, they want to go probably to a place that nobody else is hunting in or going to be hunting in. So that was identified as an issue. So what we're recommending with tree stands is that we limit the number to 2 per area, per person, and that they clearly identify their name, address, and KDWP number. In the survey, 58% of the respondents indicated they were in favor of limiting the number 17% were opposed, and the balance there was a neutral response. They didn't have one preference one way or another. Portable ground blinds has become a very popular method of hunting out of on public lands. And when you're hunting out of a ground blind, it's difficult to tell whether somebody's in that ground blind until you approach it. We've seen some areas where people are putting ground blinds, they're not hiding them. You can see them from a quarter of a mile away, but they're up there for a long time. And it gives the impression that that person is there on that area. He's hunting, so they see the ground blind, they go someplace else and try to find a place that nobody else is hunting out of. So we are recommending that ground blinds be removed at the end of every day. We didn't ask people that in the survey, but we did ask that, I forgot, on the tagging, 68% of the people that responded said that they were in favor of tagging a tree stand, 11% opposed.
Are you saying the KDW, or the KDWP number and name and address, or one or the other?
Right now we're saying either or. One of the issues that's came up is during hunter season, during firearms deer season is hunter orange, the requirement. We've got some blinds do not have orange on them. We got people walking out there in orange, they get in the blind. You know, is that a safety issue where those blinds don't have any type of markings on them other than being camouflaged? Is that an issue? We've talked about that. Should we require some type of orange marking on that? Some blinds have orange on them that you can hide with a flap. Some blinds don't. So we would have to figure out how we could, what we'd have to do to make that requirement for a hunter to put orange on his blind and where it would be placed and how much. So that's another consideration that we're looking at. The use of waterfowl decoys was addressed as an issue. Again, people have figured out that if you leave a set of waterfowl decoys out in the marsh, it gives the appearance that a hunter is in the area. They see those decoys, they go to someplace else. We've got several areas where people are going out the night before, setting out decoys, coming back the next morning and having a place to hunt. So we were recommending that waterfowl decoys have to be removed at the end of every night. And as a response, 61% of our respondents said they were in favor of removing waterfowl decoys. 12% opposed that. Another issue that is becoming popular in the state is baiting. Currently, baiting is allowed on public land. It wasn't really identified as a major issue, but we do have some issues with baiting. And some of it's people are using vehicles to drive into an area to put bait in because they don't want to carry it in, so they're using ATVs, trucks to drive into an area to put their corn or whatever they're using on the area. So it's a controversial issue, no doubt, but we feel that we need to be leaders and set the example for baiting in Kansas. There is some evidence that CWD can be transmitted at those bait piles. Kansas is the only one in the Midwest states that allows baiting on public land. All other states prohibit it. Oklahoma is in the process right now of considering, or they've proposed prohibiting baiting on their public lands. Texas also prohibits baiting on public lands. 47% of the people that responded were in favor of prohibiting baiting, and 23% said that we should allow it. So that was one of the closest responses of all of the responses from our hunter survey. The issue with that is we need to make sure that we clearly define what baiting is, what is a bait, so that we can identify that correctly, so people know what baiting is. and what is allowed and not allowed. One issue that was identified was the use of lead shot on our intensively dove managed fields. These fields are becoming real popular with our dove hunters. We use a mix of sunflower and wheat stubble that's burnt. It attracts the doves. It's very intensive dove shooting for a few days to maybe a couple weeks if we're lucky with the weather. Those fields are small. Lots of lead's being deposited on those fields, and we are considering maybe, we have talked about maybe dove hunting on public lands be all non-toxic shot, or do we limit it to those fields only? I think our recommendation is we're going to identify those fields, those heavily dove intensively managed fields for non-toxic shot. And what we're probably going to do is run it through our reference document that we do. We'll put those areas in the reference document as these areas are identified as non-toxic shot for dove hunting. We've already got about 15 areas that are non-toxic shot for everything. We're going to identify some areas that will be non-toxic shot for dove hunting. And the last item is commercial guiding and outfitting. We do have a regulation that addresses personal conduct and primarily commercial activities on public lands. And we do require some commercial activities be authorized by the department. This is mainly designed for, to keep businesses from coming in and selling goods and items and products like that. But, there's a fine line between that and commercial guiding and outfitting. And what we're proposing or probably looking at doing is creating a permit system for guides on public lands. And that this would give us an opportunity that for every guide that wants to guide on public lands, they get a free permit from us. And that way we'll be able to monitor their activities on public lands, whether it's, several years, if we don't see like feel like we have any issues, then we can, just keep going down that same road or come back later with some different recommendations. But this will give us an opportunity to monitor what impact, how much guiding activity is occurring on our public lands. I think that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Brad, I've got 2 recommendations that I'd like to make.
Okay.
On the commercial activity, I'd like for it to also include proof of insurance if it's a commercial guiding service. And the permitting process, I'd like the permit fee to be $2,000. And the waterfowl decoys, I'd like added to that the hunters remain 200 yards apart.
You're talking about groups of waterfowl hunters on it?
Between hunters, 200 yards between hunters, just a safety deal. You go to these waterfowl areas, and I've had a lot of calls on this, that, the same thing you were talking about earlier when the guy's going and set the decoy spreads up, in an hour and a half, somebody else shows up and they're setting up right next to them. And it becomes not only a confrontational deal, it becomes a safety issue. And if the commercial guys are going to guide on wildlife and parks area, they're guiding for a fee, and it's not a 50-cent fee for their clients. If they're going to do that and they're going to take the resources, generally those are going to be from non-resident hunters, and they're going to take our resources off of wildlife and parks lands, there should be a dollar fee attached with that. And if they want to do that, then
Yeah, there's something to be said for that. We're spending millions of dollars each year managing our public lands, and if people are benefiting from that.
Right.
How?
Did that scare you, Chris?
Yeah, I think there's a few issues that you're just whipping out there that we need to perhaps discuss. And one is authority to regulate commercial guides and set a fee for a permit, which we used to do, but we don't do anymore because the legislature took that authority from us. Now, if we're talking about access, Well, first, I think what Brad's proposing is a baseline to figure out if there is an issue associated with commercial gutting on public property. And what I think he's talking about is only on our wildlife areas, and it's a simple registration process with some paperwork at the end, so we have an idea of whether there's an impact to the average user. So it'd be my suggestion, before we ramp up things considerably, that we take a baseline look at things.
What does a baseline look at?
Well, like what Brad would be proposing first.
Under the permit that you're going to ask these commercial guys to get now, what are the guidelines?
Well, what we're considering right now is, like Chris said, is requiring a registration. Every guy would have to register through us, fill out a short application. We'll give them a free permit. This will allow us to identify how many guides are using our public lands. And then in return, we're going to ask them, we'll give them a short form at the end of the season to fill out of how many people, how many times did you go out, how many people did you take, what did they hunt, what was their harvest and success and things like that. So we get an idea of how many times they're using our property, what the harvest is for waterfowl, deer, turkey, anything associated with things like that. Just to give us some idea, some information that we don't currently have.
The legislator didn't tell us that we can't have decoy spreads 200 yards apart.
No,
Okay.
didn't really happen, but, I guess the one difficulty there is the enforceability as to the actual distance, but I'm
Well,
raising that
and
up.
I had thought about that a little bit, and that's why I suggested between hunters. That's fairly easy, I would think, rather than between boats or decoys, the furthest decoy. If you do it from hunter to hunter, am I wrong, Lloyd? Or not Lloyd? Am I wrong?
Kevin, I think he's.
A more standard base measurement, when you're talking about safety things, you think that hunters would be more relevant measurement.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And Kevin, from an enforcement standpoint, would it be difficult or no?
Well, we're going to have to determine some way to do that measurement accurately. Whether you use range finding equipment or whatever, I really have to consider that to the point where I can give you a really good answer at this point in time.
One other issue that I could potentially see here is if we have an issue, or we have an area at Texas Lake, it's got several little sloughs scattered throughout a couple sections, but they're all relatively close. And people, their sloughs are closer than 200 yards, but people hunt those individual sloughs. You can't see the other hunter, but he's just over the hill in another little depression. That could be, what we'd be doing is we'd be eliminating the amount of hunting area at Texas Lake and probably some others like that.
Well, that's solely my recommendation. If you've got a better answer, if another member of the commission has a better answer, that's okay. I just think some sort of guideline would be good.
Well, you have, 4 recommendations and other issues that you're still studying?
Yeah, I think we're going to proceed, we'd like to proceed with regulations for the tree stands, ground blinds, decoys, and baiting.
Right.
I believe we can address the use of non-toxic shot in our reference document. And I didn't mention this before, but we would like to implement that in 2013, September of 2013 for dove hunting, if we go that direction. The reason we're bringing to your attention now is we want to start the information discussion phase for dove hunters and for the people that are using these fields, so they'll be prepared in 2013. So they have, 18, 19 months to start preparing.
The only suggestion I have, as on your recommendations, while it says name and address of an owner and KDWPT number, I'd like for that to be or. I think there's a certain advantage just to have you have pretty good access, I'm guessing, from a law enforcement standpoint to get that number. And I've often thought on traps, there's a lot of anti-trapping people, and then so somebody gets a hold of your trap and then starts harassing you at home or something. I think it'd be better if you could use that agency number. I don't know how to recommend or suggest what we do on the 200 yards apart. It's a valid concern, I suspect. I just don't know exactly. Might want you guys to think about that a little more. And I don't think we need to take any action on this, but it will be coming back ultimately for a vote.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it'd probably be, April, June, one of those two meetings.
All right, we might give some consideration as you're getting closer to that, some of Don's concerns, so.
Okay.
All right,
You had a public comment.
yes, please.
Just wanted to define, when you're saying wildlife area for the tree stand regulations you're proposing, when you say wildlife area, say I hunt like El Dorado State Park down there, they got like 4,000 acres. You're talking about 2 stands for the whole park?
That's correct. Per person.
Per person. I used to hang 20 stands in that park. I'm an avid bow hunter. I'd put in about 750 hours a year sitting in the tree stand. And with us true bow hunters, we like to hunt the wind. And the problem with only allowing 2 tree stands doesn't give us a whole lot of choices. The thing that I saw when I hunted El Dorado Lake was the biggest problem I run across was the tree stands that were being left in the trees year after year after year and nobody taking them down. Nobody would be hunting them. One of the things that I saw was the gun hunters would put their stands up along with us, and then you would get to learn that that guy's a gun hunter, you're a bow hunter, you can go in and hunt. He's not there, he'll show up in bow season. And the other thing we got to learn was certain guys hunted weekends, and certain guys like myself, I take the time and I hunt a lot. And so limiting me with 2 tree stands would severely impact my hunting. I would have to go through some extra steps where I would have to physically move stands every day when I'm going to hunt, which I can do that. I've done it in other places. But that's one thing I would like to bring up. I don't do it as in the limit hunters, because I've never done that. I've always respected my other hunter. But that is something I just want you to think about. The other thing you brought up was the baiting, and you brought up chronic wasting disease. Do we currently restrict baiting where we have chronic wasting disease in the counties?
No, we do not.
Okay, then my question then would be, then why would we restrict it on public lands for chronic wasting disease purposes?
Well, I'm not saying
That's all.
I'm just saying that
Okay.
disease transmission at those bait piles is a biological concern.
Right.
CWD is present in Kansas, in the north central part of the state. So that could be an issue there. It's not going to be an issue
We've always,
anyplace
as
else.
Quality Deer Management Association, we've always trying to take it very seriously where we've got chronic wasting disease areas that we do limit to baiting in order to restrict the disease, spread of the disease. So I just wanted to bring up that point. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. Oh, wait. We have one more.
Personally, I already spoke with Brad over there because I thought we were leaving, but I think it's commendable on the department to take the approach of being proactive with chronic wasting disease, whether it influences the spread or not, but taking the first step in leading by example, I guess, with the baiting issue, regardless of people's stance on it. I mean, from my understanding, the Midwest Deer and Turkey Group came out a year or so ago encouraging departments to push towards doing everything they can to slow baiting or eliminate it. And so I think it's really good that the department has done that. So thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any other questions from the commissioners? Thank you, Brad. Okay, we have one more item. Free park entrance and free fishing days by Secretary's orders.
Okay. Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman, and members of the commission for giving
give me a few moments tonight to kind of go over those resolutions for 2012. The first quick one is the free fishing days. That's always the first weekend in June. So in 2012, that'd be June 2nd and 3rd. And that is what is being proposed for that date. So that's kind of the easy, quick one to get through. Now on the free entrance weekend into state parks, we have a few changes this year that we're recommending for the resolution. Over the past few years, we typically offered 2 free days in state parks, and that park chose those dates throughout the year, and kind of at their discretion to use them to maybe attract a different event or something like that, showcase their facilities, and those really were very good events and worked out very well for us. The limitation on that was that it did not really allow the department to promote one single event, maybe make quite as big a splash as we could. And now with our agency of having the tourism side and the marketing focus on it as well, we were tasked with a committee from the East Region, Pomona State Park Manager Casey Smithson, myself from Central Region, and Lovewell State Park Manager Thane Loring would put together as a little committee to kind of think of what we could do to make this work a little bit better. Maybe use the days that we have, utilize that component, plus put something out there that we could market. So we did some discussions, and ironically enough, we all were thinking down the same lines before we actually spoke. So that worked out very well. And we came up with an idea, which we are proposing as the resolution, then, is to have one free day, call it an open house, if you will, or free entrance, I should say, into state parks in Kansas in 2012, and that date would be March 31st of 2012. The purpose of that is that would be the last day that individuals could purchase their state park annual permits for the off-season rate. So that would be a very attractive on a Saturday. It'd be very customer service friendly. Our offices, we would open as a standard kind of 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., kind of be a little bit later in case some of those individuals work on a Saturday. They can still run out to the park office still and take advantage of those off-season rates. And even if they work, they can maybe make it out there within an hour or so until 6. That would reduce our staff timing and everything, so we don't earn really any extra comp time or things of that. Something else that we were really thinking about doing, if you had cabins on your state park, then we would kind of recommend an open house at a cabin to the State Fair cabin has demonstrated that there's a lot of interest in just looking at a cabin, so we can kind of rent it, possibly thinking about renting it. So we kind of had maybe a standard of about 11 to 3 p.m. on that. And then the other thing of interest that we would have is each park would kind of be suggested to have something that they could do kind of identifies them. Myself, I'm at Tuttle Creek. We have an archery range. We do archery events all the time. That's a really good one for us. Something kind of unique for us, and we could do that through our events and during that time period. So basically then, also we would also encourage and kind of request or ask our local biologists and law enforcement division maybe to have some staff there as well to make it more of a department event rather than just a state park event. They could be there to promote some of those fish and wildlife programs. Turkey season's not far off, boating season's not far off at that point, and so maybe it could be a whole department event rather than just a park event. The second free day then would still be allowed to be under this, the individual state park's choice. I believe they're in your packet. You're provided with those dates of what those would be. We felt that this would really allow us to get kind of the most. We have our best out of both worlds here a little bit. We have something that's marketable, that we could really promote the department in state parks, plus it allows each individual park to use those events as they have in the past a little bit. According to that schedule, then there's events, obviously nothing January, February. I won't go through that. And I participate in some of these, but till we started compiling this list, I didn't know all the individual events that went on. There's a lot of OK Kids events that are really popular, National Trail Days. In June, they have free fishing. Some people combine those together. That works really good for them. Some parks do a Father's Day type of event, getting people out on that day. In Milford, they do an extreme water festival that's been really popular there. Like I said, Tuttle Creek, in August, we do something that is an OK Kids event, Wounded Warrior, garden tractor pull, whole type of family event, and that works really good for us. And then there's some other things, cook-offs, chili cook-offs. Elk City has a Halloween Neowalla event in October, so there's things all across the year, basically, and it's really good events. And I know having the one day in itself will be kind of a neat thing to promote. Myself, I'm already working with a group in Manhattan to have a 5K and 10K run in March on that free weekend for a benefit one for an organization there. And over the last few years, we've had several 5K, 10K runs, and they've been really successful, attracting 200-300 people. So that is what we are recommending with those. We feel that this way, by still splitting some stuff and all that, many times on these special events, rather than have them all on the same day, we do share staff and equipment among ourselves. So like, for instance, Milford and Tuttle, we share a lot of different pieces of equipment during those dates, and so we share some things, and so we still would have that capability to do so. And we think that would be a really good event and a good way to proceed with this. So pretty easy, simple. Any questions about it?
Anybody have any questions? Is this Secretary's orders, or do we need to vote on this?
Secretary's orders, Mr. Chairman.
Well, if there are no questions.
We had.
I hate to end so soon.
I understand, we got lots of time. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
That sort of gets us to the end here. Do we need to discuss any future meetings, any future meeting dates, or are we scheduled far enough in advance?
I think we need to discuss the August meeting because there was one individual who was unclear of his schedule then, but I think it's been determined.
Do you have a suggested date?
I would well, the suggestion that was made to me was either the 2nd or the 23rd.
Of what?
Of August.
How about the 23rd?
23rd?
23rd.